Good afternoon, this is Greg Williams. Today we're going to talk about curves in Photoshop. Curves is Photoshop's most powerful adjustment tool. You can make lots of minute changes. You can make very drastic changes with curves. What we're looking at today is taking an image and moving beyond levels and correcting our dynamic range to using curves to increase contrast and add some of that pop to our image that gets the attention. So when we look at our image that we have today, we have a series of ducks. Looking at the histogram, I can tell that I don't have a bad distribution of pixels. I have some light pixels to get the right side there, and some dark pixels and quite a few pixels in between. The histogram is nothing more than a graph mapping out the value of each individual pixel. So I have a lot of pixels at this particular value. I have many fewer pixels at this value, and I have no pixels at the very, very lightest end. So the very first thing I usually do is I always try to adjust with the levels first. And looking at the levels, I'm going to tighten in my white point just a little bit, and I'm also going to look and see if I can build some mid-tone contrast by making an adjustment to the mid-tone layer. I can already tell that that's improved a little bit, but it's still not quite to where I want to get the image. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a curves adjustment layer. And what you'll notice about the curves adjustment layer, it shows the histogram much the same way that the levels histogram shows it, or the histogram itself shows it. The difference here is I now, whenever I click, have another point that I can adjust. Most of the time we're working with 3 points, the middle point, the first quadrant, and the third quadrant. And so the steeper this curve becomes at any given point, the more contrast I'll have at that point. Conversely, the flatter it becomes, the less contrast. So by pulling this down, I darken my darks. I'm remapping some of these light pixels into darker areas, and I can see the shift in the histogram over here. And completing that S-curve, I'm adding some brightness at this point in the image into the lights, and we saw that increase a little. And so as I bounce back and forth, you can watch the histogram change. But look at that image come alive as we add that mid-tone contrast. So that is the basics of building contrast with curves. You can go back in later and fine-tune it even more. Gee, I need a little bit of this or a little bit there. And that was really ugly. And we can actually add, I believe, and don't quote me on this, I believe 99 individual points along the dynamic range that we can go in and tweak and scale. By the way, to remove a point, you simply pull it straight off and it will pop off along the way. So here's our before image, here's our after image, and you can see it does not take long to bring life and contrast to your image using Photoshop.